Order, order. Hello and welcome to Reporters Without Orders, a podcast where we discuss what made news, what didn't, and some things that absolutely should not have. Joining me today is our crack reporter Nidhi Suresh, who's been traveling around Punjab lately. Actually, you might have seen her reports on Sidhu Moosewala, the rapper and politician who was killed in the last week of May. She was in his native village in Moosa, in Mansa district of Punjab. And before that, she had profiled Amanatullah Khan, the Aam Aadmi Party's MLA from Okhla in Delhi. So in the last 2 weeks rather, Nidhi has been profiling these two very interesting men. Both of them have very interesting stories. So we'll talk to her and we'll ask her and try to find out what she learned about reporting on these high-profile men in Indian politics, and if her experience of Punjab was as fun as mine. Hi, Nidhi.
Sure not. Hi.
Hi. How long were you in Punjab?
Only 5 days.
Only
You were there for about 10 days, no?
I was about there for 14 days, yeah? Yeah.
It's only 5 days. And
5
only
days.
Mansa.
Only Mansa, which
Yeah.
is in the south of Punjab.
Yes.
Right. But you were there with Ashwin.
Yes.
So both your reports are with Ashwin?
So the first report, we had like separate bylines. He wrote for Hindi and I wrote for English. And the
Yeah.
second report we did together.
Okay. So I was reading your report on Sidhu Moosewala. I haven't been seeing a lot of reporting from his village, but I did see yours. And I was wondering, when I was in Punjab, we did plan to interview him. We thought we'd go to Mansa and speak to him. I have heard his music. I don't think Ashwin had, but I liked his music. I wonder if you had any such biases before you went to Mansa. Had you heard anything he had written?
I had heard through my Delhi friends. It's something that was played in the car late night after you go out somewhere. So I had friends translate it for me. It was never something that I found super catchy or something I would go back and listen to.
Right.
So I wasn't like a fan.
Okay.
But I thought he was fascinating. Yeah.
Interesting. So we have a specimen of a dispassionate, objective journalist who obviously was not very enamored by her subject. Do you think that's an advantage?
I don't know actually, because I would lie if I said that I didn't find him more interesting after we went to Mansa. I think that listening to what he'd done for the village and the person he was changed my perception a little bit, or added to the perception actually, not changed, because I still felt that some of the things that his music talked about weren't exactly things that I enjoyed listening to, but I did feel like there was a different side to him that I found in his village. Is it an advantage? I think it's tricky. Like, for example, like when we did Amanatullah's piece, I found him extremely fascinating from the very beginning. So
Right.
I thought, and he was very accessible. He was a very nice person, which is what's interesting about profiling, because every day that you spend with the person, you learn something new. And I don't know if it's an advantage or disadvantage really. It just both work for me.
Right.
Like if I really don't like the person, also it's very interesting to know why they do what they do.
Yeah. Sometimes it's more interesting to find things about people who you might not like,
Yeah.
Because we are anyway surrounded by people we like because we choose our company, we choose our friends. But tell me, I agree with you on one thing, that the Sidhu Moosewala that comes out of YouTube comment sections where people are talking about him, oh, legend, this, that, or from media reports, is a very different Sidhu Moosewala that comes out from your reports. You speak to his friends, there's a picture in your report of, this is a school picture, where this boy who's standing beside Sidhu Moosewala, a boy named Akhil, who attends an RSS-run school.
Yeah.
And you spoke to him about what he remembered about the rapper. So let's talk about that. What were your first impressions when you went to Moosa village in Mansa? Because I remember you telling me that right from the start you felt some sort of hostility as a journalist, and all media persons did feel some hostility in his village. So why was that?
So, firstly, we reached about 3 to 4 days late after the incident had happened. So, a lot of times in those situations, a lot of information has come out already, and you're really trying to fill in the gaps of things that may not have been addressed, people who may not have been spoken to. And while going from here itself, like I'm sure you do it too, when we go to a different place to report, you speak to someone who has been reporting there. And I had spoken to Mohammad Ghazali from NDTV, and something he told me from the very beginning. He said, if you don't mind, I have two things I have to tell you. People are going to see you as a Delhi journalist. So don't use the word gun culture when you're here. And they're very aggressive. So when you're talking, just be mindful of, how you're speaking and what questions you're asking. Which was great advice, because as soon as we got there, so Sidhu's house is called the Haveli. It's the first building that you encounter when you're going towards his village. It's a newly built house. He just moved there about 15-20 days ago. It's a landmark and it's huge. So they'd already created like a section outside for journalists, and the family was grieving in private. So they had like a courtyard inside where relatives and friends were sitting, where they weren't really allowing journalists to go in. I actually had a lot of respect for the family for choosing to grieve in privacy. They didn't want to. It can get very voyeuristic, and you know that, like, when situations like this happen, every channel wants to ask what they're going through, what they're feeling, what they have to say to the country, what they want to tell the Prime Minister. And it was a challenge for reporters to work in that environment, but I think it was a very good choice that they made not to speak to speak to the media. And the next day was a little more relaxed, and we were allowed to go inside the courtyard. So, but even there, nobody wanted to talk. Everyone from friends, relatives, family. So I was then curious about why they didn't want to talk. And we actually had, so Ashwin and I were trying to talk to people, and I'm not fluent in Punjabi, neither is he. And a lot of people speak in Punjabi there. And we were trying to communicate that we're recording the conversation so that we can go back and listen later. And it so happened the person who joined the conversation hadn't heard that we were recording. So he immediately took the phone and checked, and then it became like very hostile, that they were like, oh, see, they've come from Delhi, they're recording our conversation. And I can understand the angst, because couple of things I think added to that distrust. I do think the farmers' protest did play a role in making them extremely skeptical about sections of the media, especially, so-called Delhi media, where we just parachute into a place and decide to ask people about their worst experiences in life. And they have no reason to answer us. And they were very clear about that. They said, you don't understand the village, you don't understand us, so why should we even give you time? And the second reason was that this was again told to us by local journalists, that when the security cover of over 400 people had been taken off or reduced, that list was put out by the Aam Aadmi Party online, and it was leaked, and then it was put out. And a lot of people said that the media did not question the threat that it could cause to the people whose security has been removed, and instead the media went and amplified it. Partly they also hold the media responsible for amplifying it. We don't know how much of truth there is to that fact, but the fact is that people have believed that about the media. So in that sense, there was a lot of hostility, and people are also very aware that Delhi journalists are, coming in with this, so tell us about gun culture, right? So people were very wary of like talking about what they thought of his music or what they thought of, because they were scared of how it might get twisted, which is literally what one person told us.
Right.
And all of that is very understandable, I believe, because we know what a lot of sections of media are doing today.
Yeah.
So it was challenging. I think for me, it was really, I could say easily that one of the most challenging places to penetrate or like feel like, I could actually have a conversation.
Yeah. Your experience of reporting there is in a way different from mine, because when we went there, I think this is a thing that happens before elections, that when you go to report before an election, people are keen to talk to you.
Yeah.
And especially if you're a Delhi journalist, because then they are smart enough to know that their voice is not just going around Punjab, it might just go around the country,
Right.
and they'll be seen across the borders. But now, when you went, that was not the case. But the circumstances were also different, right?
I think it was mostly they were hesitant to talk about Sidhu Moosewala. Like for the second story that we did, which was about a cancer in his village, it was very different. So with that, people were okay to talk about it. In fact, there was one person who was helping us who got it announced from the Gurudwara that there are 2 journalists looking to speak to cancer patients or family who've lost people to cancer. So please call up this local person who's taking them around. So that was very it was very endearing and very nice of the person who was taking us around to do that.
Right.
So that was very different from reporting on about the incident.
Right.
So yeah.
You know, I'm reminded of something our friend Shrishti, the journalist, she told me that when she had done a report on gun culture before the election, she had met Moosewala. And she had a very, the interaction was full of friction because he was a little hostile to her. I think because she came from Delhi and she spoke either in English or in Hindi.
Yeah, and I don't think he speaks.
Yeah, and he asked her to speak in Punjabi.
Yeah.
And until she did that, she felt she was intimidated. But when her story on gun culture did come out, she told me that a lot of people whom she knew in Punjab were not happy because they don't like being portrayed in that light where, they don't want to be stereotyped as a state where people just love guns, like it's the deep south in America or something. So just tell us, who was Sidhu Moosewala and where did he come from?
So Shubdeep is his real name, and he chose to call himself Moosewala because he wanted to put his village's name on the map, which is why people feel a lot of pride, I think, especially when it comes to him. Something interesting that someone told us there was, from the time that they're very young, a lot of kids in school are constantly told and had to read in their textbook that Mansa is a backward area and Mansa is a backward region. So a lot of them used to say that even if we go to Ludhiana or if we go to Bathinda, people look at them as people from a backward region, and they've probably not even heard of the village Moosa. So people have this thing that it was Sidhu Moosewala who put us on the map, who gave respect to this village, who gave us a name. And that's a very deep-rooted sense of pride that you can sense in people there. And apart from that, like everyone I spoke to who were his close friends said that, he was passionate about guns. He enjoyed, due to 2 reasons, he started collecting guns. He was attacked in Canada in 2017 when he went there for his music. And after that, ever since then, there was this sense of paranoia that he is being followed or he could be a target, but his friends said that, he was always fascinated by it. So that was also a reason for him to then start collecting guns. He loved cars. He liked accessorizing his cars. He spent a lot of time doing that. He also has his favorite tractor there with his name on it. He's an athletic person. He played a lot of sport. And he was an average student according to his principal, but he was like, something his teacher said that he would constantly follow teachers until he made sure that his name was there on some singing program.
Nice.
So we also spoke to the driver who used to drop him home every day from school, pick up and drop him for almost 8 years. And the driver recalled him as someone who was extremely humble and continued to recognize him and meet him even after he became a big star. And I think something that people really value about him is the fact that, unlike other Punjabi musicians, a lot of them shift to Mohali or Chandigarh or Bombay. Sidhu Moosewala decided to continue staying in his village. And his mother actually became the Sarpanch in 2018. And along with her and using, the influence he had in the village, he was doing a lot of work in the village, according to people. So they said that he's improved a lot of roads, dispensaries in the area which weren't functioning were restarted with the help of his mother.
Right.
So a lot of, apart from, like, his music seems to have a very different personality.
Right.
Which I think is also a very real side of him, which, I will never get to meet now in person. But the side that I saw of him in his village was of someone who had a lot of pride in his identity and where he came from, and was grounded to, was determined to sort of put them on the map, basically.
Right.
And he loves his parents, and he's sang songs also for his parents, which people in the village see as, he's seen as an ideal boy. Someone who's proud of his identity, family oriented, stays in his village, talked about farmers' issues.
Yeah.
And he's a man, They
Yeah.
see him as a macho man,
Right.
which is what he also went
Right.
for. That's what he was going for.
Yeah. So viewers, this is all we have on video for this podcast episode. If you want to listen to the rest of it, it's available on newslaundry.com. You can head over there, click on Reporters Without Orders, and select the 223rd episode of this podcast.
We, being an independent platform, depend on our readers, viewers, and listeners. Support independent media by subscribing to Newslaundry. Go to newslaundry.com, click on the subscribe button at the top, and pay to keep news free.